Ryu is a pathetic loser who got hit by a truck and was reincarnated into a world of magic. Now he can use magic and wants to live a normal life, but he ends up getting cheat ability by God and became the strongest mage. This all begins with Ryu, who suddenly wakes up in a blank white space with no idea what happened. While he is still trying to process it, a tall blonde man appears and calmly tells him he already died. That is when Ryu remembers being hit by a truck. Totally confused, he asks if the man is God, but the guy says he is more like an angel whose job is to send him into a new world. Ryu is stunned, but the angel tells him his next life can be whatever he wants. Since Ryu is the laid-back type, he asks for a quiet, easy life. The angel agrees and explains that the new world has magic, though only around 20% of people can use it. Ryu is gifted with water magic, so he gets sent to a protected cabin deep in the forest. The place has enough food for 2 months, plus a hidden barrier that keeps monsters away. When Ryu wakes up there, he wastes no time trying out his powers. Inside the house, he finds frozen meat, an empty bath, a knife, and 2 basic books about nearby plants and monsters. Outside, he discovers he can make water appear just by thinking about it, with no spell words needed. He wants a warm bath, but the water he creates is only normal temperature, so he tries making fire by rubbing sticks together. That goes nowhere. Then he gets smarter and freezes water into an ice lens, uses sunlight through it, and manages to light a fire. Later, he even realizes he can make hot water directly if he uses logic and science with magic. The next morning, while eating dried meat, Ryu understands he cannot rely on stored food forever. If he wants to live out there, he needs attack power. First, he practices throwing water balls at a tree. He can hit it, but it does not do any real damage. Then he tries making a pressurized water stream, but it comes out so weak, it looks ridiculous. Even so, he remembers the angel saying imagination and practice are the keys, so he keeps training until his water shots become more accurate. After that, he starts working on ice attacks too, since he has always wanted to fire sharp icicles, like in fantasy magic. It is harder than using water, but he sticks with it and slowly improves. As time passes, Ryu gets much better with both water and ice. One day, he finally goes deeper into the forest to gather food. At first, things are peaceful, but then he spots a wild boar glaring at him. The beast charges, and Ryu barely dodges in time. After seeing it smash through a tree, he forces himself to fight back. He freezes the ground in front of it, making it slip, then creates a row of sharp icicles in its path. The boar crashes straight into them and dies on the spot. That night, Ryu checks his monster book and finds out boars are actually among the weakest monsters around. Then he notices 2 extra entries in the book. One warns about dragons, saying they are strong enough to destroy cities and should be avoided at all costs. The other talks about demons, mysterious beings so dangerous that meeting one basically means death. Ryu realizes how huge and deadly this world really is, so he decides he has to get stronger fast. The next day, he heads out again and runs into an assassin hawk. He barely escapes its first strike, then discovers it can send invisible wind blades at him. Knowing he cannot win head-on, he runs while throwing up blocks of ice behind him for defense and firing water attacks back. None of them hit. When the bird dives again, Ryu throws up an ice wall at the last second. The hawk crashes into it, loses an eye, and finally retreats. After escaping, Ryu loses his way and stumbles across a glowing lake. Standing on top of the water is a headless knight beside a headless horse. The sight leaves him frozen, but somehow he makes it back to the cabin alive. After that, he continues training and fighting tougher monsters. Eventually, he returns to the lake at night and finds the headless knight waiting for him. Since the books say nothing about Dullahans or headless riders, Ryu cannot tell whether it is some rare monster or something else entirely. Still, he challenges it. Using an ice sword, Ryu tries to land a hit, but he cannot touch the knight even once. He gets beaten around instead, blocking desperately with an ice shield until he collapses from exhaustion. The knight does not kill him, though. Instead, it approaches with a small crystal knife, coats it with water, freezes it, and turns it into an ice sword before handing it to Ryu. He understands right away that the knight is teaching him a technique he needs to master. Not long after, Ryu meets the assassin hawk again, but now it has evolved and become even deadlier. Its wind attacks are stronger, and his ice walls barely hold. He keeps retreating while trying to block, but then the hawk unleashes a sonic blast that destroys his shields and follows it with lightning. Ryu realizes he is in serious danger. Just before the finishing strike lands, he draws the crystal sword and manages to block. This time, he can even cut through the bird's invisible attacks. When the hawk rushes him again, he drives the blade into its chest. As the hawk falls, Ryu walks over and strangely feels thankful. Even though they only fought twice, that monster pushed him harder than anyone else and forced him to improve. He thanks it for making him stronger, then lets it die peacefully. Right after that, a dragon suddenly appears. Ryu thinks it is over for him, but instead, the dragon talks to him through telepathy. It asks if he has seen a black hawk, and Ryu panics, assuming he may have killed the dragon's servant. To his surprise, the dragon stays calm and even praises him for beating it. The dragon then notices Ryu's weapon, and tells him it is extremely rare, the sword of the Fairy King. Shocked, Ryu starts asking questions, and the dragon introduces himself as Lewin. They spend the whole day talking, and by evening Lewin leaves, saying they may meet again someday. A few weeks later, Ryu starts craving seafood and heads to the beach. There he finds a wrecked ship and a dead man nearby. Then he hears someone groaning and quickly realizes there is one survivor. That person is Abel, who remembers a giant octopus attacking the ship during a storm and throwing him into the sea. When Abel wakes up fully, he finds himself inside Ryu's house. He immediately looks for the others, but once he steps outside, he is completely lost. Then Ryu appears behind him. Abel is shocked because, despite being a skilled fighter, he never sensed Ryu coming. He is also caught off guard by Ryu's strange outfit, though he politely keeps that to himself at first. After thanking Ryu for saving him, Abel learns that everyone else had already died before Ryu found the wreck. Abel says it is fine since those men were smugglers anyway, but before he can explain more, hunger hits him hard. Ryu invites him inside for food, and during the meal Abel starts asking questions. He brings up Ryu's clothes, and Ryu explains he has no extras and no material to make more. Abel first says he should just buy some, then quickly realizes that might not be possible. Ryu clears things up by saying nobody else lives nearby. Abel then asks if Ryu survives by hunting, and Ryu confirms it. When Abel points at the knife, Ryu shows him his water magic and explains that magic does most of the work. Abel is surprised, saying that from what he knows, about half the world can use magic, unlike him. That confuses Ryu, because he had been told only 20% could. Later, Abel asks Ryu to take him back to the shore so he can check something. On the way, Abel insists on walking ahead if danger appears, since he does not want to keep being the one who gets rescued. Ryu lets him do it. When they reach the wreck, all the bodies are gone. Abel figures the sea or nearby monsters must have taken them. He thanks Ryu again, knowing the same would have happened to him if he had not been saved. Abel still cannot find what he was searching for, and now he wants to reunite with his companions. The problem is, the storm carried the ship so far south that he no longer knows which way to go. Then he gets an idea and asks Ryu to come with him. He says Ryu could help guide him back, and once they reach the city, he could help Ryu find proper work and a better life. After thinking it over, Ryu agrees and decides to travel with Abel back towards civilization. That night, Ryu stares at the garden he worked so hard to grow and feels sad knowing he is about to leave it behind. Later, he tells Abel he is going out to say goodbye to someone. Abel is curious, but he does not push. Ryu goes to the lake to meet the headless knight and tells him he will be leaving the forest for a long time. He thanks him for all the training, then pulls out his knife and says he wants one last serious fight. The knight draws his blade too, and the two clash. Ryu attacks with everything he has, but after a long battle, he finally runs out of strength. The knight heads back toward the lake, and Ryu thanks him again. This time, before leaving, the knight turns around and raises a magical suit of armor from the water as a farewell gift. Moved by the gesture, Ryu thanks him once more and returns home. The next morning, Ryu and Abel leave the forest. On the way, a wild boar appears, and Abel asks to handle it. He rushes in and kills it instantly with a combat skill. Ryu is impressed, so Abel explains that weapon users have special techniques called combat skills. That night, they sleep inside a hollow tree. The next day, they pass through a swamp and spot lizardmen. Abel decides to avoid them since they are strong, but Ryu senses they are still being followed. When the monsters close in, Abel prepares to fight, but Ryu joins in and instantly drops 4 of them with icicle lances. Abel is stunned because mages he knows can only fire one attack at a time. Ryu casually acts like summoning several at once is normal. Later, Ryu makes ice cups and fills them with water, and Abel notices his spellcasting sounds different than before. Ryu quickly brushes it off. After that, Abel gives him a coin, and Ryu gets excited because it is his first time seeing money there. Abel is shocked by how isolated Ryu has been. He starts explaining the 3 big nations in the Central Plains, but Ryu keeps making fun of the Deputy Empire's name the whole time. Soon, they walk into a field where a nearby rock suddenly moves. Abel cuts it apart, while Ryu blocks incoming stones with a water shield. They realize they have entered a rock golem nest. Abel attacks one, but even after blasting a hole through it, the creature repairs itself. Then Ryu solves the problem in his own way by dropping a huge block of ice on top of the golems and crushing them. Abel is stunned by how absurdly effective that is. Afterward, they find one special golem with a large magic stone, which Abel says is worth a lot. Ryu wants the others too, but they are buried in ice and he cannot be bothered dealing with it. As they keep going, they encounter a giant beast that looks like a mix of a crocodile and a hippo. Abel identifies it as a behemoth, a rare monster so strong that even he has never seen one before. Ryu asks if they should hunt it, but Abel immediately shuts that down. Then wyverns appear, and Ryu gets excited to watch the fight. The wyverns attack with magic, but the behemoth roars and completely shuts their spells down. Ryu guesses it used some kind of magic cancellation. That night, Abel asks more about that ability, saying he has only heard of dungeons having traps like that. Ryu gets way more interested once he hears there is a dungeon in the city they are heading toward. He gets annoyed that Abel did not mention that earlier and starts asking what else he left out. Abel checks if Ryu at least knows about elves and dwarves, but Ryu clearly does not. A few days later, they reach the mountains. Ryu says there should be human lands beyond them. Abel asks how he knows, and Ryu almost mentions the dragon who taught him a lot about the world, but keeps it to himself and gives a vague answer instead. Not long after, they hear something above them and prepare for trouble. A griffin appears, and both of them panic. Ryu quickly throws meat into the air. Abel copies him, and the griffin takes the food and flies off. Once it is gone, they both realize they would not have survived a real fight with it. Abel then says humans have not seen griffins or behemoths near settlements for over a century, probably because the mountains kept them out. That reminds Ryu of the wyverns they saw earlier, and he figures their nest must be nearby. He is right. Soon, they find a group feeding. Abel says monsters like that normally require around 20 skilled adventurers, but Ryu argues they may have to face them sooner or later anyway. He asks if Abel can kill one if it is pinned down, and Abel says yes. Ryu then fakes a long chant and summons icicles that nail the wyvern's wings in place, letting Abel finish them off. When 2 more show up, Ryu does the same thing again without chanting, which makes Abel suspicious. Still, they kill them, collect the magic stones, and move on. After crossing the mountains, they arrive in Green Hills. Abel is amazed they survived wyverns and made off with valuable loot. Ryu then asks which country they are entering, making it clear he wants anywhere except the Deputy Empire because he thinks the name sounds awful. Abel finds that reason unbelievably weird. Later, Ryu spots a road, and Abel says it should lead to a town. Ryu gets excited about finally sleeping in a real bed, while Abel recommends the food. By night, they arrive and eat at an inn. During dinner, Abel suggests Ryu join the Adventurers Guild. He explains that a guild card can serve as identification, helps with city entry taxes, and lets members sell magic stones and monster parts for good money. Ryu starts teasing him for bringing up the silver coin he already spent on him, but Abel ignores it and keeps explaining. Then Ryu's food arrives, and he is completely stunned. It is curry rice. He cannot believe a dish like that exists in this world, and the first bite hits him with pure nostalgia because it tastes just like home. He finishes it immediately and orders another plate. The following day, Ryu cannot stop talking about the curry. He jokes that Abel has clearly been hiding valuable information from him and demands the rest of the truth. Abel looks uneasy, but Ryu is only interested in one thing: where the dessert shops are. Abel dodges the question, claims he is not into sweets, and leaves so awkwardly that Ryu gets even more suspicious. Not long after, they arrive at Lon, a town surrounded by endless wheat fields. At the gate, a guard named Nimmer recognizes Abel and is stunned because Abel had been missing for months. Abel explains that he only made it back thanks to Ryu, so Nimmer warmly thanks Ryu for saving his friend. Once inside, Abel takes Ryu straight to the Adventurers Guild. He explains that beginners usually start at F rank, but a recommendation from someone ranked B or above can push them up to D rank right away. Since Abel qualifies, Ryu has a chance to skip the bottom tier. At the guild, Abel's return causes a huge scene, with everyone excited to see him alive. While he gets pulled into the reunion, Ryu steps outside for some air. Out there, he runs into an elf girl. Ryu is distracted by her looks, while she is more focused on his outfit. She recognizes his coat as something connected to the Fairy King, and casually says he must be pretty favored to have received it. Ryu has no idea what she means, and before he can ask more, she says she is busy and leaves. Abel later brings him back inside and introduces him as the one who saved his life. Ryu gets showered with praise, then Abel asks the receptionist to register him as a D-rank adventurer. She is surprised and says he still needs proof, so Abel requests the guild master. When Hugh, the guild master, hears Abel is back, he rushes in. Abel explains everything and shows him the wyvern magic stones they collected. Hugh is blown away, especially after hearing they crossed the Malefic Mountains, a place almost no one survives. That alone convinces him, and he approves Ryu's D rank immediately. Soon after, Abel's party shows up in tears because they thought he was dead. Hugh leaves them to reunite and takes Ryu to finish registration. He explains that Abel's team, Crimson Sword, is one of the guild's top parties. Ryu mostly wants to know if he really deserves D rank, and Hugh tells him yes, if Abel could not have done all that alone. Then Ryu clearly proved his worth. At the office, a receptionist named Nina handles the process. She tells him new adventurers can stay in guild housing for 300 days and also mentions a beginner dungeon course. Ryu signs up immediately. Then she has him place his hand on a crystal device, which records his information and creates his guild card. Just like that, Ryu officially joins the guild. Afterward, Abel takes him around town and offers to buy him clothes and a staff as thanks. Ryu accepts the clothes, but says a staff would be useless since he can cast magic without one and fights with a blade in close range anyway. Abel is even more shocked when Ryu says the small knife he carries is actually his sword. Still, what Ryu really wants is information, not gear. That is when he learns something strange. This world uses the same time system and even the same metric measurements as Earth. Hours, days, months, everything matches. That makes Ryu think someone from Earth must have come here long ago and influenced the way this world works. Later, Abel takes him to a big inn, where guild members throw a party to celebrate Abel's safe return. The night gets so wild that Nina has to rescue Ryu the next morning and show him to his room. At the guild lodging, Ryu meets two roommates already staying there, Nils and Edo. Soon after, Nina brings in another new recruit named Amon, and the four of them quickly start getting along. A few days later, Ryu and Amon finish their beginner dungeon training and are told they will enter the first floor that afternoon. Amon is clearly nervous, but Ryu tells him not to waste energy panicking before they even arrive. At the dungeon, the instructor explains that the city was built around it and that monster surges sometimes happen, though not right now. The first floor is supposed to be safe, so the students are allowed to explore near the entrance. Ryu and Amon stick together, and before long, Ryu senses something coming. A giant soldier ant appears, and Ryu instantly recognizes it from the monster guide. He pins it down with icicles and tells Amon where to strike. Amon lands the killing blow and gets his first monster kill, which leaves him thrilled. Ryu even pulls out the ant's magic stone as a memento. That night, their roommates are impressed by the story, though Amon gives Ryu most of the credit. He says he wants to go back the next day but feels uneasy about going alone, so Ryu agrees to come. He is curious too, since the first floor was supposed to be empty, yet they still found a monster. Edo adds that soldier ants have been appearing more often on the upper floors lately, which makes everyone wonder why. Then Abel drops by and explains that soldier ants can tunnel upward, which probably solves the mystery. The others are starstruck, seeing a famous adventurer up close, but Ryu talks to him casually as always. Abel jokes that the boys should help look after Ryu because he lacks common sense. Nils, totally excited, tells Abel he is his idol and asks for a handshake. Abel agrees and reminds him that staying alive matters more than glory. Later, Abel's party arrives and drags him off for skipping his guild report. One of the girls keeps staring at Ryu with obvious curiosity, while another apologizes for the chaos before taking the group away. After they leave, Nils and Edo are still hyped, but Ryu does not see what the big deal is. The next day, Ryu and Amon return to the dungeon and fight a pack of monster dogs. Ryu traps them with ice, while Amon cuts them down. Afterward, Ryu says Amon's sword style reminds him of Abel's. Amon explains that he was taught by an old swordsman named Kiro, who learned from a major school in the capital. Ryu figures Abel probably came from the same background. He tells Amon his style is solid and safe, but it burns too much energy, so he needs better stamina. To encourage him, Ryu points out that even Abel trained every morning, which proves talent alone is never enough. Amon feels fired up hearing that. The next day, Ryu visits the library and heads for the alchemy section, but the number of books completely overwhelms him. He steps outside to clear his head, and right then, a total solar eclipse suddenly darkens the city. A second later, he realizes something is wrong. Everyone around him is gone. He instantly senses danger and blocks a fire attack from behind with a wall of ice. When he turns, he sees a demon woman walking toward him. Ryu knows at once that she is the strongest enemy he has faced so far. Running feels impossible in that strange space, so he prepares to fight. He throws up layers of ice barriers to stop her flames, but she switches to wind magic that punches through his defense. His armor saves him, and when she notices the Fairy King's robe, she realizes he is no ordinary human. She closes in with a sword, and Ryu answers with his own ice blade. He stays defensive while she overwhelms him with speed, but compared to the headless knight who trained him, her attacks are still manageable. Ryu counters with a storm of icicles, but she dodges through them easily. As the fight drags on, he realizes she is boosting herself with wind. When she charges for the finish, he blocks cleanly enough to surprise her. That is when she demands to know who he is and how he has the Fairy King's gear. She goes all out after that, and Ryu responds by changing tactics, mixing icicles with high-pressure water strikes. He finally manages to wound her, only to notice her injuries healing almost instantly. That moment of distraction lets her slam him into a building. Just when she is about to end it, boiling drops begin falling from the sky. One splashes onto her and burns her badly, forcing her to hide inside a sphere of rock while the scorching rain continues. Once it stops, she explodes back out with even more firepower and marches toward him again. But by then, the eclipse is ending, and sunlight begins to destroy her sword. Realizing the fight cannot continue, she backs off. Instead of leaving silently, she introduces herself as Leonore and asks his name. Ryu gives it, though he makes it clear he wants nothing to do with a demon. Leonore is surprised that he even knows about demons. She admits she should have killed him earlier, then tells him to survive until they meet again because next time she plans to finish the job properly. The eclipse ends, the city returns to normal, and all signs of the battle vanish like nothing ever happened. Shaken and exhausted, Ryu decides to buy some books and rest. He stops by the bank to withdraw money from the wyvern stones he sold, then heads back to his room, only to find his friends are not there. Ryu is heading out of the dorm when he catches Nils, Edo, and Eamon being cornered by a few rough adventurers. The troublemakers are led by a guy named Dan, who mocks them for complaining after getting jumped while hurt. According to him, monsters in a dungeon would not care either. Before he can keep talking, two of his buddies suddenly collapse. Ryu had already moved. He tells Dan, the lesson sounds great, and maybe he should try following it himself. Dan charges in swinging, but Ryu slips past him and drives the handle of his weapon into his stomach hard enough to fold him on the spot. Once that is over, Ryu checks on his friends and tells them their endurance is terrible, if losers like that can catch them lacking. Even so, he says the first step is healing up, not acting tough. They all head to the bathhouse, where a priest treats the injury Ryu got earlier. The others are surprised he was even wounded at all, but he keeps quiet about who caused it. Not long after, the three boys start entering the dungeon together without him. Amon and Nils take the front, while Edo stays back to support and patch them up. During one run, they notice something is wrong. Goblins, including archers, are appearing much closer to the surface than they should. Eamon wants to keep pushing for more rewards, but Nils shuts that idea down and reminds him that greed is how people die. They decide to leave while they still can. That choice saves them, because deeper inside, another adventurer team gets wiped out by a far stronger creature. Elsewhere, Ryu keeps replaying his clash with Leonore in his head. He feels fine about his casting speed, but not about his movement. She was simply too fast. Since he cannot borrow wind magic for speed, he starts trying to invent his own method. His idea is to use water pressure to launch himself forward. He tests it by standing on ice and firing streams from behind his body. The result is underwhelming. He does move, just not enough to be happy about it. Later, he returns to the library to dig into alchemy and anything related to demons. At the same time, Lin is also there, searching for proof of a spell powerful enough to create a gigantic wall of ice and crush rock golems. She finds nothing, which makes her think Ryu might not be telling the full truth after all. While looking around, she crosses paths with Sira, exchanges a few words, and then the two separate. Back at the guild, Nils and the others report what they found underground. Nina quickly realizes the information matters and rushes it straight to Hugh. He takes it seriously at once. Goblins climbing that high in the dungeon is not normal, and to him it looks like the start of something bigger. He immediately calls in every party ranked B and above. That only leaves two groups in town, Crimson Sword and White Brigade. Abel is already annoyed before the meeting even begins, mostly because he hates dealing with Phelps. Once both teams arrive, Hugh explains the situation and says there may be another large-scale dungeon surge coming. Their assignment is to confirm what is happening. If things have already gone bad, they are to return at once so the city can seal the area and bring in the knights. Both parties accept. The next morning, Ryu plans a visit to the Northern Library. His roommates tell him that D-rank adventurers can enter, though the truly restricted books are for higher ranks. That only makes him more interested. When he gets there, he likes the place right away. Still, he avoids asking anyone directly about demons because that would sound suspicious. Then he notices Sira again and instantly loses focus. At nearly the same time, Hugh and the two top parties arrive at the dungeon entrance. Just before the door opens, Abel senses danger and tells Lynn to check ahead with magic. She does and immediately detects a massive cluster of monsters packed behind the gate. That confirms it. The dungeon break has already started. Hugh orders a retreat and sends out urgent messages. The city reacts fast. The dungeon is sealed off, and adventurers are called to the defensive wall around it. Nils and the others soon realize their earlier discovery was only the beginning. Meanwhile, in the library, Ryu finally speaks with Sira. She asks what he came for. He almost says demons, catches himself, and instead claims he wants to study alchemy for golem making. Sira likes the idea and offers to guide him to the right books. While helping him, she mentions that she runs a B-rank party alone, and that most elves avoid humans, though she does not really fit that mold. Then the real battle begins. The dungeon gate gives way, and a flood of goblins pours out. Adventurers and knights fire down from the walls with magic and arrows, trying to stop the swarm before it spreads. Hugh can tell right away, this attack is worse than the last major one. In the middle of the fighting, Nils brings Abel fresh arrows and word from Hugh that Crimson Sword is expected to deal with the enemy leader once the smaller monsters are thinned out. When the battlefield finally starts to clear, Abel and Phelps take their groups down from the wall and move toward the dungeon entrance. A goblin general appears first, then another, then a third. Abel understands immediately that this means a goblin king is still inside. He quickly splits the targets, taking one general himself while assigning the others. During the fight, he notices the king step forward and yells for everyone to drop. A devastating wind attack tears through the area in the next instant and wipes out the generals in one shot. Now the Goblin King stands alone, and it is obvious that only Abel and Phelps can challenge it head-on. Even together, they struggle to damage it. Abel then uses a sword technique to slip past the king's strike and land a direct attack, but it still is not enough. At the perfect moment, Lynn sends her magic through the opening he created and finishes the monster. The defenders finally relax, thinking the worst is over. By the time Ryu returns to the guild later, the building is full of noise and excitement. Hugh, on the other hand, is buried alive in paperwork. He now has to report the incident, sort payment, arrange repairs, evaluate everyone involved, contact higher authorities, and handle the fallout from closing the dungeon. Ryu's roommates explain what happened, proudly talking up Abel's performance. They also mention Lynn's finishing spell and the technique Abel used to avoid ranged attacks. When Abel himself arrives, he names the skill, Perfect Shadow. Ryu is weirdly impressed by the name more than anything else. Soon after, Lynn and Rihia show up as well. Lynn wastes no time, and asks Ryu directly whether he can really make an ice structure on that scale. Ryu answers so casually that it sounds ridiculous, saying he can manage something like a 40-meter cube. That only makes her more confused. She asks if it is a custom-made spell. Ryu does not even understand the term. When she explains that normal magic depends on recited formulas, he basically says he sees those as optional flair. That answer completely breaks her train of thought. Before she can keep digging, Ryu escapes the conversation by running off to eat. Not long after, work becomes scarce because the dungeon is shut down. The request board is nearly empty, and Ryu's roommates are frustrated because there is barely any way to earn. Ryu says he is not hunting jobs anyway, he needs magic copper ore for alchemy experiments. The others are shocked because that material is expensive, but Ryu has enough money for it. Then he suddenly offers them a deal. If they go to an abandoned mine and gather the ore for him, he will pay them well, just for taking the job, plus extra for each piece they bring back. The only rule is that all of them return alive. That is more than enough to win them over. After they leave, Ryu heads back upstairs but hears a commotion outside. Looking down, he sees a few knights trying to force a woman away while another adventurer steps in to stop them. The argument escalates until one of the knights goes for his sword, only to immediately lose footing and slam into the ground. He tries to recover, but it happens again. Then Phelps arrives and shuts the whole thing down. The knights try throwing attitude at him until he reveals exactly who he is. The moment they understand his family background, they back off in a hurry. Once the woman is safe and the other adventurer leaves with her, Phelps glances up toward Ryu and greets him. For a second, Ryu worries he somehow noticed the trick that caused the knight to slip, but Phelps is only referring to the stories Abel has told about his magic. Their conversation does not last long before Phelps' secretary arrives and pulls him away. Ryu can tell both of them are dangerous in a very different way than ordinary adventurers. Later that evening, Ryu is eating by himself when Abel joins him. After a bit of back and forth, Abel admits he could use help with something and drags him into the entertainment district. There, he explains that a friend in the Night Order asked him to round up a few officers who skipped out and disappeared into the nightlife instead of doing their duty. While they are searching, Ryu notices a suspicious group in masks and points them out. Abel says strangers pass through town all the time, but Ryu reminds him the dungeon is closed, so that excuse does not work right now. The masked men notice them too and try to bait them away. Ryu and Abel follow on purpose. The trap springs, and Ryu instantly flattens the attackers with dense chunks of ice. Afterward, Abel searches them and finds an alchemy-related item that catches Ryu's interest. He also learns the group belongs to another country and holds adventurer ranks of their own. Abel ties them up and prepares to hand them over. At the same time, the runaway knights from earlier decide they want revenge on Phelps. They never even get the chance to act. Before they can do anything, Phelps' secretary immobilizes them with poisoned needles. Then she erases them with fire so completely that nothing is left behind. A day after the dungeon disaster, officials from the capital arrive to investigate. The moment they show up, problems start. Their leader, Clive, acts like Lon should bend over backward for them. He expects the city to feed and support his whole team, even though supplies are already low. And on top of that, he wants the dungeon reopened immediately for research. Hugh pushes back hard, saying that reopening it so soon is asking for trouble. Clive waves around his authority from the new dungeon ministry, and the argument drags on until the older mage traveling with the group steps in to calm things down. He settles the supply issue for the moment, then backs Hugh on one point. If reopening the dungeon causes damage to the city or its people, the ministry will carry the blame. Clive hates that condition, but Hugh refuses to move without it, so he is forced to accept. The old mage then says they will need strong adventurers guarding the expedition. Elsewhere, Ryu heads for the inn, where Abel's team stays, because he is hoping for better food than what the dorm serves. Right before he enters, a girl rushes out and begs him to bring her to the guild because she has urgent news for Abel. Ryu is hungry, but he helps anyway. The letter she carries is from Abel's old instructor in the capital, asking him to escort the research group going into the dungeon. Abel does not like the idea. He remembers a powerful team that once entered a dungeon too soon after an outbreak and was never seen again. Ryu tells him that sounds like a good enough reason to refuse. The girl then introduces herself as Natalie, a rookie mage from a well-known water magic family. Lynn starts grilling her about unusual ice spells, but Natalie has no answers. She is still just a beginner. When she hears Ryu can supposedly create absurdly large ice constructs, she is stunned. Abel, of course, makes it worse by praising Ryu like crazy and even warning his own teammates never to pick a fight with him. He tells Natalie that if she ever cannot reach anyone else in an emergency, she should run to Ryu first. Despite his worries, Abel ends up taking the job. The next day, he joins the research mission as an escort. The old mage greets him like an old acquaintance, and they speak about a mana reading device that sends information from inside the dungeon to a team waiting above. For the first 3 days, the group keeps descending and reaches the 7th floor without finding anything strange. Clive's people clearly want a breakthrough fast, but Abel ignores their attitude. Back in town, Ryu is stuck outside like the rest of the lower-ranked adventurers, though one thing keeps bothering him. He asks Hugh what color the outbreak monster's stones were. Hugh immediately notices the question matters, because those goblins left behind pale yellow stones instead of the green ones they normally should have had. Then everything goes sideways. While exploring deeper, the research team finds an odd gate radiating unfamiliar energy. They guess it may connect to somewhere far away, and begin setting up tools around it. The second they try to interact with it, the entire group disappears. Outside, Natalie sees the readings die instantly. A moment later, the signal flickers back for just a second, showing the group on the 40th floor, then vanishes again. The truth is worse. They have not simply gone deeper, they have been moved somewhere else. Once the group regains its bearings, Abel checks on his people first. Everyone from his side is alive. Clive, meanwhile, is less afraid than excited. He realizes his old theory was wrong. The monsters from the outbreak did not come from farther down in the dungeon. They came through this place beyond the gate. To him, that discovery could make his career. While he is busy dreaming about promotions, shapes begin appearing in the distance. Back on the surface, the support crew is still panicking over the broken signal when another man arrives. Christopher, representing the Magic College, which normally competes with Clive's academy. Rivalry does not matter now. He reveals that his own team also entered the dungeon and vanished the same way. When he hears the lost group briefly appeared on the 40th floor, he is stunned. Nobody has ever gone beyond the 38th before. Natalie realizes this situation is far beyond anyone around her. Then, she remembers Abel's words. Without wasting another second, she runs off to find Ryu. At the same time, Hugh hears the escort team may be gone and rushes straight to the dungeon. He orders the guild staff to stay ready but says nothing publicly yet. He wants proof before starting full panic. Meanwhile, Ryu is in the library and getting nowhere with his search. While moving upstairs, he catches himself hoping he might run into Sira again. This time, he actually does. She is shelving books, and he goes to talk to her right away. He says he has been looking into old Eclipse records and past monster outbreaks, trying to compare them. Sira says she knows exactly where that material is and leads him there. As they walk, Ryu shares his suspicion that eclipses and outbreaks might be linked. Sira says that idea is not crazy at all. She has lived long enough to notice eclipses often happen before outbreaks, though never one as extreme as the recent one. She asks what made him think of that connection. Ryu almost says too much and stops himself. To dodge the question, he brings up magic stone colors instead. Sira lets it slide and explains that stone color usually reflects a monster's age. Pale stones are tied to newly born monsters. That makes the outbreak stones even stranger. Ryu says, weak goblins are one thing, but stronger creatures like goblin generals and the Goblin King should not have appeared so quickly if they had only just come into existence. Sira agrees. Something about it does not fit. Creating that many monsters artificially would take a ridiculous amount of mana. Then Sira remembers that older records from a previous outbreak mention similarly pale stones, and offers to show Ryu those damaged files. He follows her deeper into a neglected part of the library. Far below, the missing team is still trying to figure out where they are. The old mage confirms their instruments still work, meaning the surface probably knows they are alive, at least in theory. Still, he doubts help can reach them. He asks Rihia if the place feels familiar. After thinking it through, she compares it to standing inside a giant sacred barrier, something like sanctuary magic on an enormous scale. If that is true, it means nobody can leave and nobody can enter either. Abel immediately understands how bad that is. Lynn uses wind magic to scan the area and detects around 1,000 humans nearby, along with dozens of creatures she cannot identify. Abel assumes the humans must be Clive's people, and heads toward them with the others. At the dungeon entrance, Hugh meets Christopher and the remaining researchers. Once he hears the missing team appeared on the 40th floor, he loses whatever hope he had left. Sending more adventurers would just get them killed. Christopher agrees. There is no rescue plan right now, only waiting. Inside the sealed zone, Clive's side is already getting slaughtered. Strange enemies are attacking them with violet fire, forcing some researchers to hide behind barriers, while the rest die almost instantly. When the attackers finally come into view, Clive recognizes them from old texts. They are devils, not demons, and that distinction does not make anyone feel better. By the time Abel's team reaches the scene, only Clive and a few others are still alive. Rihia and the old mage recognize the creatures too. Old stories describe devils as monsters stronger than humans and supposedly resistant to magic. The old mage does not care about rumors and orders a full magical assault. To everyone's surprise, the attacks work. The devils bleed. Rihia is shocked, but the mage explains that magic immunity was never proven fact, just old speculation. Even so, they have another problem. Their casters are burning through mana too fast. Abel spots one enemy that clearly stands above the rest and realizes that one must be the key. If they can bring it down, they might survive. Once the mages start running dry, Abel's team pushes forward into close combat. Warren shields the others while the party cuts down devils one by one. They make progress, but the pressure keeps rising. Lynn exhausts her mana. Rehia and Warren have to cover her. Then Rehia notices something horrifying about the leader, mismatched eyes. She tells Abel that this is not just another devil. It is a demon prince, the kind of being that could eventually become a demon lord. That is about the worst thing he could have heard. Abel decides there is no room to back down now. Even if he cannot kill it, he can at least try to reduce the enemy numbers and buy time. He throws himself into the fight, cutting down weaker devils, but the prince wipes his teammates away from the battlefield and turns its full attention on him. Its speed is overwhelming. Clive's group tries helping with magic, but the prince shrugs it off while the remaining devils force them back. Abel goes all in with one of his high-speed sword techniques and manages to slip past an attack, but his counter does not finish the job. The prince answers with a brutal strike to his shoulder and drops him. Abel cannot even stand. The demon prince raises its weapon to finish him. Then, the ceiling explodes. Ryu comes crashing in. For a second, nobody says anything because nobody can believe what they are seeing. Ryu looks over at Abel and casually asks if he is still alive, like he just arrived late to dinner. Abel tries to explain that they cannot leave while that monster is standing there. Ryu just says he will take care of it. When Abel desperately tells him it is a demon prince, Ryu more or less treats that information like it is mildly annoying. A little earlier, Natalie had found him and begged for help after learning Abel's group had vanished. Ryu listened while moving. He made her an ice carriage, hauled her straight to the dungeon, ignored the guards trying to stop him, blocked them off, and forced his way inside. Then, deciding the staircase route would waste too much time, he used his water magic to cut a direct path downward. Now, he is face to face with the demon prince. The lesser devils attack first. Ryu erases their projectiles with ice and kills them almost instantly with slicing water attacks. Then he turns to the prince and tells it to move already. The prince charges. Ryu steps aside and cuts its head off in one strike. For a second he thinks that was enough, but the creature picks its own head back up and reconnects it. So Ryu stops playing around. He unleashes a mass of cutting water streams, shreds the prince completely, and destroys its core in the process. The body turns to dust. Just like that, the fight is over. Abel can only stare. The enemy that nearly wiped them out is gone in seconds. When he thanks Ryu for saving everyone, Ryu says he can repay him with food. Abel answers that dinner is not enough anymore and promises to treat him for a whole week. Rehia rushes to Abel. Warren carries the unconscious Lynn away, and the old mage also thanks Ryu. Ryu brushes it off and says he just made it in time. Then he notices how many people did not survive long enough for that to matter. Abel suggests collecting the devil's stones and using the money to support the families of the dead. Ryu agrees, but his attention is already shifting to the bigger mystery. Everyone there admits they have never actually seen devils before. Ryu wants to ask more about how devils differ from demons, but he saves that for later. What matters right now is the strange barrier-like field he sensed around the area. It disappeared when the prince died. The old mage thinks that must have been what trapped them there. Ryu then mentions something else. While moving through the 39th floor, he sensed an unusual presence near the staircase. He suggests checking it before they leave, because it could be tied to everything that happened. Before moving on, they collect the devil's stones. The stones are dark, unlike anything anyone there recognizes. Even the old mage has never seen ones like them. Rehia says there are no records of such stones in church archives or museum collections. The mage adds that devils have long been linked to space-time phenomena because they seem to appear from nowhere. Ryu hears all of that and realizes one thing. They still do not have the full picture. In another labyrinth, far from Loon, Roman's party reaches a shadowy ritual site and tries to call forth the Demon King. The one who answers is Leonore. She immediately realizes these humans have no clue who they summoned. When Roman proudly says he is the hero destined to defeat the Demon King, she gets interested for half a second and tests him herself. The result is pathetic. He is dropped almost instantly. Since the fight is not even remotely entertaining, Leonore loses interest and takes the black crystal resting on the altar as if she is picking up a souvenir. The rest of Roman's team is too terrified to move. She tells them to quit staring and heal their leader before he dies. Even while being treated, Roman keeps calling her the Demon King. She corrects him and says he is aiming at the wrong level entirely. According to her, he might one day challenge the actual Demon King, but he is nowhere close to someone like her. Then she brings up Ryu, saying she finally met a human worth noticing. Before leaving through a portal, she tells Roman that if he wants to reach that level, he would need to become absurdly stronger. Meanwhile, back in the other dungeon, Abel's side finds a damaged black orb that looks just like the one Leonore took. Nobody can identify it, so the old mage decides to carry it back for study. Once they make it out, Hugh is relieved to see Abel and his group alive, but he still turns straight to Ryu and asks what possessed him to freeze the guards and storm the dungeon alone. Ryu apologizes, but the old mage immediately steps in and says none of them would be standing there if Ryu had not done exactly that. That kills the scolding right away. When Hugh hears the full story, he is shaken. The old mage explains that the 40th floor held dozens of devils and even a demon prince. Hugh first assumes Abel's party somehow held the line, but the mage tells him plainly they never would have survived the prince. Ryu was the one who turned the whole disaster around. That creates a new problem. The old mage says Ryu's name needs to stay out of official records, because once nobles hear about someone like him, they will start interfering. Hugh agrees that keeping him out of politics is the safer move. The next morning, Ryu drags his roommates into training again, and leaves them behind almost immediately. On his way back, the smell of curry pulls him into a restaurant, where he unexpectedly finds Sira. They end up sharing a meal, and she asks him the usual questions about his rank and background. After eating, Ryu asks why she almost never appears at the guild even though she is an adventurer. She tells him she works as a sword instructor for the local knights, so she has no reason to spend time there. Then she invites him to spar later. Ryu says yes on the spot, partly because his last fight still left him restless. At the training grounds, Sira comes at him fast. He manages to defend himself well enough to impress her, which already puts him above most of the knights she teaches. Then she stops holding back. The next exchange is completely one-sided. Ryu gets overwhelmed, loses control of the pace, and has his sword broken. He admits defeat, but instead of backing off, Sira throws her arms around him because she is genuinely excited to meet someone who can even push her that far. When she asks where he learned to fight, Ryu says the Fairy King taught him. That answer completely catches her off guard. Their conversation gets cut short when her maid arrives to remind her about a lesson she has to give to the Lord's grandson. Before leaving, Sira tells the maid to take good care of Ryu, because he matters to her, which the maid instantly misreads. Right after that, Hugh arrives in a carriage and tells Ryu to get in. Ryu expects a delayed lecture, but Hugh says the old mage already explained everything. So instead of a real punishment, he gives Ryu a compulsory guild assignment: escort duty with a merchant caravan. A little later, Nils comes to Ryu with a serious request. His home village needs help with a monster problem, but the job can only be accepted by a D-rank adventurer or a party tied to one. Since Ryu is the only one among them who qualifies, Nils asks him to join up temporarily. Amon says the enemies are only goblins and skeletons, though Ito points out that those two usually do not show up together. Ryu barely cares about the strange setup. He hears skeletons and gets interested immediately, since he has not fought any yet. That is enough for him to agree. When they bring it to Hugh, he warns them that the mission is not as simple as it sounds. Two groups have already failed there, including a D-rank team. The boys are shocked. Hugh explains that the monsters were not the only problem. The villagers themselves refuse to cooperate. Nils cannot imagine his people acting that way, but Hugh still lets them take the mission and reminds them not to underestimate it. He also points out that Ito's healing will matter a lot if things go bad. They reach Cagliati quickly thanks to all the running Ryu forced on them. The villagers welcome Nils back warmly, which surprises Ryu because he had half expected Nils to have been kicked out for being a menace. Nils gets annoyed, but not enough to deny it. They meet the village chief, Bulin, who explains why the earlier adventurers failed. The first group went too far into the eastern forest, an area the village treats as forbidden. After that, trust broke down, so the next party got nothing from the villagers and left with nothing done. Nils says there is more to the story, but it involves village secrets, so he needs permission before he can explain. That night, the group stays at his family home. His younger siblings greet everyone, and the conversation drifts into how Nils wanted to become an adventurer long ago, but had to stay because their parents died and the family needed him. Later, after meeting with the council, Nils returns and says he has permission to tell them the truth. The village has two unusual things. One is a guardian beast living in the eastern forest. Ryu instantly starts imagining some cursed legendary monster turning evil so he can fight it, and Nils shuts that down before he can get carried away. The second is a shrine tied to the village's past. The next day, Bulin takes them to the area where the goblins have been showing up. Eamon and Edo spot tracks, and Ryu senses a group moving nearby. Nils suggests leaving one alive, so it leads them back to the nest. That plan works perfectly. Ryu immobilizes the goblins, The others cut them down, and the lone survivor runs straight to a cave. There are more goblins outside, so Ryu locks those down too, and the boys clear them out. Then their real target appears, a goblin general. The others tense up immediately, but Ryu shuts it down so fast it barely feels like a real fight. He restrains it with ice and lets Nils finish it. After collecting the stone, they return to the village. The elder is pleased to hear the goblins are gone, and then leads them toward the shrine. On the way, Edo notices the symbol hanging from her staff, and recognizes it as a sign of the Earth Mother Goddess. That opens up an older story. Long ago, several gods were worshipped in the region, but now almost everyone only follows the Goddess of Light. Their village kept the old faith. The elder also explains that her healing magic does not work like church magic. She does not rely on the same chant-based system. Soon, they reach the Guardian Beast's cave. Ryu is ready for some dramatic monster reveal. But what steps out is a huge speaking wolf named Kusen. He is strangely disappointed that it is not some corrupted enemy. Kusen shocks the others by asking for Ryu's name directly. Usually, he does not even bother telling humans his own name. This time is different. He says Ryu carries a presence similar to the fair folk, which makes him feel familiar. That only adds to Ryu's growing suspicion that his connection to the Fairy King means more than he thought. Kusen then explains the real problem. About 30 skeletons and a stronger undead leader are trapped near the shrine, and he has been holding them back. The plan is to wipe out the lesser skeletons first, then deal with the boss. Once they start, Ito's light magic tears through the regular undead with ease. After that, Eamon and Nils open the sealed gate and expose the giant skeleton leader. Ryu changes their weapons into ice hammers and takes over battlefield control while they handle the damage. He sends an ice signal into the air, so Kusen knows to release the seal. The huge skeleton rushes out, only to lose its footing immediately because Ryu freezes the floor. Every time it tries to rise, it slides again, and Eamon and Nils keep smashing it until it finally falls for good. Once the battle ends, they go into the shrine itself and discover a statue of the Earth Mother holding a broken sphere. The elder remembers being told that the statue once held a shining stone that later blackened and shattered. Combined with Kusan's earlier comments about strange outside mana reaching the shrine, she concludes that some foreign force caused the monsters to appear. To stop it from happening again, she seals the shrine completely. On the way back to Lon, the group talks about a different problem. Their guild housing time is almost over. Nils and Edo have already been talking about renting a place together, and invite Eamon and Ryu to join them. Amon agrees immediately. Ryu does not say no, but he does not say yes either. Once they get back, Ryu's forced escort job begins. By coincidence, his roommates are on the same caravan assignment, guarding a merchant headed to Whitnash. Nils proudly announces that their party now has a name, Room Number 10. The others already gave up fighting it, and Ryu cannot even be bothered to react. During the trip, he learns the merchant is traveling there for the Open Port Festival, which only happens once every 5 years. That gets his attention fast. When they arrive, the merchant tells the guards they are free to enjoy the city for the next 10 days before the return trip. The moment he finishes speaking, Ryu and Nils bolt straight for the food stalls, with Ito and Eamon trailing behind. Before long, they are eating their way through the festival, and Ryu notices that a lot of the food feels oddly familiar, almost like it came straight from Earth. Whitnash gets packed the next morning, but entry slows to a crawl because one high-status visitor has a paperwork problem and the guards make everyone wait. Oscar, the debut Empire's strongest mage, is stuck in that mess too. While they wait, his aide asks why the Emperor sent both him and Princess Fiona. Oscar says he cannot prove anything, but he suspects the Emperor expects some ugly political cleanup and wants it handled without Fiona seeing that side of him. Since she is his gifted youngest daughter and already leads the royal mages, that sounds believable enough. Oscar decides the reason does not really matter. His job is to keep her alive. That night, the visiting nobles attend a formal event. Fiona shows up with her older brother Conrad, who handles the social side while she quietly suffers through it. Once he notices she is drained, he tells her to leave early. She happily heads back, throws herself onto the bed, and wishes she were training with soldiers instead of smiling at aristocrats. The festival starts the next day with a big parade. Ryu notices Abel, sitting with the important guests and looking deeply uncomfortable. Nils notices Fiona instead and starts staring, so Edo tells him to stop dreaming and aim lower. Then Lin, Rihia, and the rest of Abel's group show up. Ryu asks why Abel is sitting with the elite, and Rihia explains he is standing in for Hugh until their guild master arrives. Lin then spots a strong wind barrier around the VIP area. Ito thought it was just standard protection, but Lin says Whitnash's ruling family is rumored to own a relic that can create a wind shield, so this must be it. Ryu immediately gets excited over the idea of a treasure item that casts magic on its own. Lin says it wastes too much power for everyday use, but it makes sense during a gathering full of nobles and royals. Then she brings up Fiona's second-in-command, a feared fire mage known as the Inferno Magician. The stories around him are wild, from wiping out huge groups of soldiers to killing a wyvern in one hit. Rihya says maybe not all of that is true, but she still wants nothing to do with him. After that, Abel's party heads off. Ryu turns to leave with his friends and nearly runs into Oscar. Both of them avoid the crash at the same moment, exchange quick apologies, and move on. Ryu forgets about it fast. Oscar does not. Later, Oscar is stuck buying festival snacks for Fiona and looks miserable, hauling everything through the crowd while his assistant keeps checking the list. Around the same time, Abel crosses paths with Conrad. Conrad says Abel reminds him of someone, but Abel brushes that off. He admits sitting near Fiona earlier felt weird, though the person he found more interesting was Oscar. Conrad suddenly makes an excuse and leaves. Back in her room, Fiona is resting when Oscar returns with the food. His aide mentions the boy he almost bumped into, and Oscar says the kid moved too sharply to be ordinary. Fiona asks who they mean, and Oscar describes Ryu as someone dressed like a mage but carrying himself like a swordsman. Then he uses fire magic to heat up her snacks for her. Fiona is delighted and thanks him by calling him teacher, which only makes him awkward. The next day, Ryu and the others watch an archery game over the sea. Amon and Edo both join and both miss badly. Ryu asks Nils if he wants a turn, and Nils proudly says he has never even held a bow. Abel happens to hear that and laughs because he used to be the same. Ryu immediately uses that to shove him into the contest. Abel is not interested, but he still fires one shot and nails the hardest target. The crowd goes wild. His victory lasts only a moment, because Rihya shows up and coldly asks why he did not come find her the second he was free. Lin quietly explains that Abel had promised to spend the day with Rihya, and now he is paying for messing that up. Rihya drags him off while Nils continues worshipping him from afar. Back in Lawn, Sira spends the day looking for Ryu. When she cannot find him, she asks Nina at the guild and learns he is out of town for a couple of weeks. She is frustrated because she found something she wanted to tell him and now has to wait. Back at the festival, another event starts, a boat race. Nils and Eamon compete while Ryu and Edo watch from shore. Then Dan shows up, and Nils instantly starts beefing with him. Since racers are allowed to attack each other during the second half, both idiots go all in. They start smashing each other with their oars instead of focusing on the race. Before long, they break their own, steal their partner's oars, stall out right before the finish, and let every other boat pass them. Then they tip into the water and keep fighting there too. The audience finds them hilarious and gives them a reward just for entertainment value. Naturally, they argue over that as well. The next day, the group checks out a strange ship that moves without sails or paddles. Hugh explains that it runs on a mix of alchemy, magic stones, and wind-water systems. After that, they stop at a weapon shop. Edo wants something that lets him support the party from mid-range, and the owner recommends a repeating crossbow. It fits exactly what he wants, so he buys it right away. That night, Abel goes to another formal gathering at the mansion now that Hugh has gone home. After speaking briefly with Conrad and Fiona, he realizes he feels weird without his sword. He tells himself that does not matter because the wind barrier is active. Bad timing. At almost that exact moment, the artifact maintaining the barrier starts failing. The mages running it panic, but assassins hit them before they can fix anything and kill them on the spot. Fiona also senses that something is wrong just before the garden gets blasted. Abel, meanwhile, has been pulled into a private room by the Lord of Whitnash. The room is sealed with a soundproofing item, so neither of them hears the attack outside. Abel assumes this must be some serious political matter, but the Lord actually wants to discuss Lawn's beginner training course for new adventurers. He has heard it lowers rookie deaths and wants to bring the same idea to Whitnash. Abel likes the plan. The Lord says Hugh already agreed to share materials and instructors, but he also wants the future teachers to take the course themselves so they know how to train newcomers properly. While they talk, the mansion outside is turning into a battlefield. Elsewhere in the city, Oscar is still out with his people. They ask why he is not eating, and he says he prefers to stay ready until Fiona is back. They tease him for worrying too much, which drags old memories to the surface. Oscar grew up in a quiet mountain village and used to have red hair. He was talented with fire magic from childhood and liked using it to help people, whether that meant helping the blacksmith with heat control or lighting fires at home. One day, the blacksmith gave him his first sword, and Oscar thought he was finally old enough to fight alongside the adults. His father took him hunting, but made him use a bow instead. That night, the village celebrated. Then came word that bandits were nearby. The villagers had no time to run, so they tried to defend the place. At first, they held the line, but the bandit leader was far stronger than expected. He broke through, opened the gate, and let the rest flood in. Oscar was sent home to protect his mother. It did not matter. The bandit chief broke into the house, killed her, brushed off Oscar's fire, and nearly killed him too. His father arrived, but after seeing his wife dead, he lost his head, got lured outside, and was cut down as well. Oscar watched both parents die in front of him. He survived only because wolves approached the village and forced the bandits to pull back. The blacksmith found him afterward, told him to keep living, and later sent him running for the river when wolves surrounded the house. Oscar escaped by pure luck and was carried away by the current. A wealthy old man found him and took him in, comforted him, and gave him a second chance. Oscar stayed, studied, and asked to learn the sword so he could become stronger. A few years later, that life also ended in fire. He came home one night to find the mansion burning and the old man's family murdered. The killer was the same bandit chief from before. Oscar fought back and managed only to scar his face before being beaten down. After that, his hair turned white and he left with one goal: revenge. Back in the present, the mansion is hit with fire attacks and erupts into chaos. Fiona finds Conrad hurt and shields him while trying to heal him, but he tells her to save her mana. The attackers have surrounded the place, and it becomes obvious that he and Fiona are the real targets. He tells her they have to fight or die. Together, they take down several enemies, until Conrad hears a dangerous chant and warns her to use her strongest barrier. She gets it up in time to block Bullet Rain, a top-tier attack spell, but it drains her badly. Before they can recover, another enemy caster starts a second spell, combining earth and fire. Fiona realizes what it is before Conrad does. The ground under him starts shifting and heating, so she shoves him away just before the spell erupts. The blast launches her into the sky. At that exact moment, Oscar reaches the estate. Seeing Fiona thrown upward, hits him like a nightmare repeating itself. Fiona spots him too and tells him to protect Conrad. Oscar immediately orders his people to cover the prince while he goes after her. At the beach, Nils and the others are waiting for Ryu when they see the pillar of fire rising over the mansion. Then they notice someone falling. Nils runs and catches Fiona before she hits the ground. Amon reaches him next, and once they recognize the princess, Ito warns that enemies are still nearby. Two attackers rush in to finish the job. Amon intercepts them. Edo blocks with a barrier and fires his new crossbow, and together they kill both. Now, they know this is far bigger than some random attack. If enemies chased Fiona all the way out here, nowhere close by is safe. They start thinking about where to hide her. Then Oscar arrives and ruins everything. He sees Fiona lying there beside three unknown young men and assumes they are the assassins. Amon and the others see a dangerous white-haired mage charging toward them and assume he is one more attacker coming for the princess. So both sides get ready to fight the wrong people. When Abel finally leaves the private meeting, he walks straight into chaos. The mansion is burning, people are screaming, and he instantly realizes the sound blocking setup kept him sealed away while everything went to hell outside. As he tries to understand what happened, Conrad spots him. Elsewhere, Ryu notices Fiona's flare in the sky, but misreads it completely. He thinks it is just some flashy festival spell and is mildly disappointed when it fades out. A second later, two hooded men barrel into him, send his food flying, and keep running. Ryu is already irritated because he waited forever for those snacks, but the pair look shady enough to catch his attention. At the beach, Oscar charges toward Nils, Amon, and Ito, demanding they let go of Fiona. He instantly assumes they are the enemy and starts insulting them before attacking. Edo barely gets a barrier up in time, but Oscar's magic hits so hard it almost crushes him anyway. Another barrage follows. Edo blocks again, but the shield shatters and he drops right after, completely spent. Amon steps in front of the princess as the last line of defense, fully expecting to die. Then a wall of ice appears and swallows Oscar's next attack. Ryu walks in, sees his friends hurt, and his mood turns cold immediately. He asks Oscar what the hell he thinks he is doing. Oscar tells him to move because nobody is keeping him from the princess. He attacks again, but Ryu cuts the incoming magic apart with ice. Oscar realizes this new opponent is the real problem and stops holding back. He throws out heavier fire spells. Ryu answers with layers of ice. The collision erupts, but when the smoke clears, Ryu is untouched. Then Ryu starts pushing back. He sends down waves of icicles, forces Oscar onto defense, and keeps the pressure on. Oscar responds with stronger fire magic, including a swirling flame attack that wipes out one wave. But Ryu just shifts position, drops in from above inside a shell of ice, draws his blade, and closes the distance. Oscar answers with a sword wreathed in fire, and the fight turns into a brutal clash of magic and steel. That is when Abel finally reaches them and yells for both of them to stop. Ryu does not care. He tells Abel to stay out of it or get frozen too. Abel knows from the tone alone that Ryu is serious, so he tries a different angle. He goes straight to Oscar, identifies himself as Lon's guild representative, and explains that the boys protecting Fiona are adventurers from his city, not assassins. He says Oscar's concern makes sense, but this is a misunderstanding. Oscar starts to hesitate. Ryu does not. He says that if the talking is over, he is ready to finish Oscar now. Abel tells him to stop being stupid, but Ryu snaps back that he has no reason to forgive someone who injured his friends. When he even hints that he could freeze Fiona too, Oscar's restraint vanishes and he unleashes a massive fire attack over the beach. Ryu wipes it out with water, turning the whole area into steam and sudden rain. Then Ryu asks Abel one more time whether he is allowed to kill Oscar now. Abel finally says the one thing that gets through to him: if Oscar dies here, it turns into an international crisis, maybe even war. Abel puts himself between them and tells Oscar that Conrad sent him to secure Fiona. Then he turns to Ryu and tells him to stand down. Ryu fires back by asking whether Abel would be so calm if someone had hurt Rihia instead. Abel admits he still would not choose war if it could be avoided. That answer irritates Ryu, but when he sees Abel refuse to move, he finally backs off. He tells him to hand Fiona over, and Oscar, though still suspicious, decides helping the princess comes first too. Later, standing on the beach, Ryu thinks about how all of this started with a shipwreck and Abel. He looks at his injured friends and realizes just how much his life has changed. By the next morning, everyone is fine again. Edo is especially thrilled when he learns Rihia was the one who healed him. Ryu calls it a decent enough ending. Abel, meanwhile, is exhausted because he spent the whole night untangling the political mess Ryu almost caused. Luckily, Conrad and Fiona accepted the explanation, and Oscar even apologized, though Ryu still is not happy about it. Then Abel tells Nils, Ito, and Eamon that Fiona wants to reward them personally for saving her life. Ryu, on the other hand, gets nothing, since officially he was not part of her rescue. Back in Lon, Sira has been getting more and more restless, waiting for Ryu to come back. She always lived comfortably on her own, but spending time with him ruined that a little. Now, she keeps wondering when he will return. One day, she walks into her favorite restaurant and finds him there. Her face lights up instantly. Ryu notices her too and invites her over. After they eat, Sira takes him into a hidden section of the library to show him a rare alchemy text she found. Ryu is grateful and starts copying notes by hand. Sira points out that if the original had been on proper paper, he could have just used a transcription spell instead. Ryu is completely stunned to learn a copying spell exists at all, and Sira laughs because to her that is the most basic thing imaginable. When he finishes, Ryu asks something that has bothered him for a while. Sira spends a ton of time in the library, and the fees are not cheap, so how does she afford it? She tells him she works for the local lord, and that arrangement lets her use the place freely. Then she offers to show him the transcription magic in action. When they get there, they run into Abel leaving the shop. Both Abel and Sira are surprised that the other knows Ryu. After Abel leaves, Sira gets a little annoyed and tells Ryu something directly. He is too casual with Abel, but still keeps a polite wall-up with her. She wants that to change. Later, Ryu meets Abel at the inn and reminds him about the dinner promise he made after the dungeon rescue. Abel panics because he completely forgot. Ryu says he wants something else instead. Since his time in the dorm is nearly over, he wants a house with a large yard where he can work in peace without people bothering him. So he wants Abel's help finding a place. Abel takes him to a property agent, but the man explains that Ryu cannot buy noble class land because he is still just a commoner. The agent does have one possible option, though, a farmhouse outside the city. Ryu goes to see it and likes it almost immediately. He buys it on the spot without bothering to negotiate. For Ryu, it feels like another step toward the quiet life he keeps wanting. He has no idea, things are only getting bigger from here. And that's where this video ends. Watch this following video until a new one.